This conference will now be recorded.
Well, hello, and welcome to the Let's Talk Business show with Sal Acosta, the Duke of Business, and I'm JoAnn Forrester, the Empress of Business. After all, the Empress has to have a Duke by her side. We today are talking with a lawyer who has a great deal of experience, and we had a pre-conversation, and this is Jacquelyn Core. And the reason I was so interested in talking to her is the experience that she's had as a CEO, you told me that was deliberate, that you deliberately went in and became a CEO of an organization, and now you're back into private practice, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, welcome, Jacquelyn. And I'm very interested in your decisions that you made to be in charge of a nonprofit, and tell us about that.
Yeah, so I started my legal practice in a large firm. I was with Steptoe & Johnson for many years, was a partner there, and was in private practice. Loved being in private practice. I was doing primarily litigation work, lots of labor and employment litigation work, representing businesses of all sizes when I was there. And my children were small, and I transitioned into an in-house role for a while. While I was at Steptoe & Johnson, I had gotten a PhD in economic development. It's actually a human geography PhD. I was an economic geographer, studying uneven economic development. And so I had an academic credential and a law degree, 2 doctorates, and I had gone in-house with a joint appointment at WVU that was both a legal position and an academic administrative position. And I spent a few years there. Had an opportunity to take a couple of vice presidential positions in higher education. I was the first I was the vice president for institutional assessment and planning, and I did assessment and accreditation, and then moved into a vice president of academic affairs position and provost position, and ran the academic side of the house at a private liberal arts institution. Undergraduate, graduate international programming, taught in the MBA program there, and spent some time in academic administration. And then actually I was thinking about transitioning back into private practice. My boys had gotten a little older, and it seemed like the timing was going to be better to go back into private practice. And, it just kind of occurred to me that the thing that I hadn't done was actually be a C-suite leader. And so I had these vice presidential positions, but I had not yet been the person who sat with the P&L sheet in front of me and made the hard decisions for a business, and made decisions regarding labor, and had to really manage the entirety of the enterprise. And I knew when I came back into practice that I really wanted to focus on doing exclusively mergers and acquisitions work for the most part. I can tell you what I'm doing now. We can talk about that. And it's not really exclusively mergers and acquisitions, but it's certainly my focus, is the deal work, which I really love. But I thought that I was really lacking the operational understanding of being a CEO. And I thought that that would be a real value add for my clients if I could sit in a position where I had been where they were, and I had run a business, and I could have not just the ability to give them a solid legal opinion, but the ability to deliver that to them in the context of the operational impact of it. And so that's why I say it was really intentional. So I decided I wanted to find a C-suite position. And at the time when that happened, a CEO position came open in my local community, where I thought I could also have a real community impact and do some community development work. I've always been passionate about public health, and so it let me do a lot of things in the public health and in the preventive health arena. And I really enjoyed it. And I think it did give me a great understanding of what it's like to run a business and the challenges of that. And I think that it did give me the strategic advantage I hoped it would when I came eventually back into practice.
Hey, Jacquelyn, let me ask you a question, because obviously you are highly educated, have held a lot of high-level roles within different professions and different ways of looking at things, different industries. A lot of the people that view our program are either business owners or want to be business owners or professionals in the future. At the same time, they may also be thinking, oh, okay, I want to have kids, I want to have a family. How and this is a little bit of sort of the interpersonal part of this, right? But how hard was it to balance all those things, the academic achievement, the high level jobs, the having a family? And then is there something that, and by the way, how stressful, because I know JoAnn's also doing some work with stress management. So how hard was it to manage the lifestyle, the responsibilities, the stress? And is there some tips and tricks that you could give people that are thinking of doing all this in the future, maybe to make it a little bit easier for them?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to share about that, Sal, because I did, when I was practicing, it was a lot. I was a single mom. I had two really small kids that I had with me most of the time, and I really wanted to do an amazing job first and foremost of being their mother. I didn't want to miss anything, right? I knew that it was time I would never get back. And I wanted to be at baseball games, and I wanted to, see them in the school play and be a really active and involved part of their life. And so I was super intentional about that. There are things that I mean, certainly you make sacrifices, right? And I think that's the first thing that you have to realize is that there are sacrifices you have to make, and you have to decide what is important for you as an individual. And, I think that for me, there were lots of things that I could sacrifice and not really care about it. And so the way I balanced it was to say, I'm going to have two focal points, and one is going to be my family, and the other is going to be, my personal and professional development, my education, my career. And in every decision that I made, I think I looked at how does this impact what I'm trying to do personally and professionally, and how does this impact my family? And so I really boiled it down, and I tried to be really strategic and intentional and mindful about the decisions I was making and how I was spending my time. And it meant that there were times in my life where, I love to read. I'm a really voracious reader. And there were times in my life where I did very little pleasure reading because it wasn't in the cards. I've always been on what Tim Ferriss would call a low information diet. I don't read the newspaper. I don't watch the news. I don't listen to the news. And it means sometimes I'm playing catch up, but if you are involved with people, even for networking purposes or your business colleagues, you find out what's going on in the world. I don't ever feel like I don't know what's going on in the world. I am a little bit more intentional about trying to figure out what's going on internationally because it fascinates me and it's important to me. But those are, the kinds of things where you just make decisions about how you're going to spend your time and what you're going to do. And so, I've always really prioritized, and my kids joke about it sometimes. My 16-year-old who's upstairs, he'll say, yeah, I know, Mom, because you want me to have something hot in my lunch. And I have this thing where I just made a commitment when the boys were young that they were going to have a hot breakfast, that we weren't going to have cereal for breakfast. Because I felt like I would be cheating them if we did. And that's not a priority for everybody. And I don't think everybody should have to do that for their kids, right? It was something that was personal to me, that it was important to me, that I wanted to send them out the door on hot breakfast. And so I made a commitment. That's one of the things we're going to prioritize. We're going to prioritize having a hot breakfast. I'm going to try to pack them something in their lunch that's a hot lunch, in a container so that they have something hot for lunch. But those are things that were just personal to me. So I think the best thing I could tell people is to really take the time, and it does take time, to really take the time to evaluate who are the people in what are the things that are the most important in your life, and to really try to focus your time on those things to the elimination of other things. We don't have cable TV.
Ah,
And so I watch very little TV. I'll watch a movie with my son. I can't say I haven't watched, a series of shows ever, because I'll do that occasionally, but I'm very intentional about how much TV I watch, and it's almost none, right? But I'm very close to my best friend. I don't have a ton of friends, but her, I really wanted to be able to preserve a relationship and spend time with her. And so that's something I've always prioritized, is how do we get together, and during COVID, some of it's been virtually even, right? But how do we get together and spend time together every week? So I'm not neglecting that relationship. So I think that's the thing, is to sit down and figure out what are your big rocks, right? What's important to you, which is going to be different for every person, with no judgment on yourself as to what's important to you. And then to really focus on how you carve out your time for those people in your life who you decide are important, and those things in your life, whether it's achievements or your career, education, whatever it is that you really think are important.
good advice. Very good. I'm going to use some of that in my speech tomorrow. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free, JoAnn. I mean, if it helps people, that's the best thing, is if it could provide just somebody like a little bit of guidance or direction. I think everybody should try to feel like they have an amazing life. And I feel so blessed. But I think you have to be intentional in making that.
Yeah. You chose law as a career. Why?
Well, this is really interesting. So my mom and I went to school practically at the same time. She went back to college when I was a teenager. And so I don't think I even really knew. I went to a small rural high school. I don't think I really even knew totally what my options were. And I kind of had in my head this idea that, there were a few options that smart people did, which was completely inaccurate, right, at the time. But, I thought, well, I could be a doctor, I could be an accountant, or, I kind of only knew professions as something I could go and do. I came from a blue collar family. My dad was very extraordinarily hardworking. And so I had a really good work ethic instilled. But I had a high school teacher who taught, civics and political science kind of things. And I was fascinated by government. So I had her for American government, and I just was fascinated by it. And at first I didn't think I would go in that direction. I thought I might go to medical school. I went to school intending that I would go to medical school. And I was fascinated by government. And I never wanted to really be an elected official, because I don't think that's in my nature, really. I never wanted to be that. I never wanted to have that much of a public life. But I was fascinated by the process. And I'm so glad I did it, because I will tell you, it has just opened so many doors, and it really has been a path that has allowed me to do so many different things. As there have been large portions of my career that I haven't spent as a lawyer.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always been a lawyer in some way, right? So when I was in academia, I was also reviewing contracts, and, I was still acting as a lawyer for the university. And when I was in a nonprofit, I was doing everything from, a workers' compensation to contracts to compliance. So there have always been legal aspects to my job, but not necessarily always a primarily legal job title.
Now, Jacquelyn, let me ask you a question, because I saw on your LinkedIn profile that you speak Italian. Have you used that in a professional capacity in any way, or is that just more of a personal thing? And do you visit Italy? How is that helping you and personally or professionally?
Yeah, so I wish I was even more fluent, and my fluency now is probably down because I haven't been to Italy for a couple of years for any length of time. When I was in academia, I developed an international linkage with a university in Marino, right outside of Rome. And I did spend some time teaching there. And so, I mean, I'll tell anybody who wants to learn a language that, I am the person who's tried every language learning platform that's out there, Pimsleur and Rosetta Stone. And, I've used apps and I've done online programs, to try to learn language. I've used flashcards and bought books, and I've read short stories in Italian, and to try to improve my language fluency. And really nothing will improve your fluency like going somewhere and being forced to speak the language. Particularly if you put yourself in settings where you either force yourself to speak the language, or you have to speak the language because there's no alternative. And that is what I did some when I was just traveling. So I've traveled pretty extensively in Italy. My family's Italian, so it's my heritage. So I love the food. I love the culture. As you guys can see, I talk with my hands. If you tied them behind my back, I'd be mute. So I mean, I identify really closely with my Italian heritage. And one of the things I did when I was traveling is I put myself in places. I would get on the train in Rome and I would go to Orvieto, where if you walk into a non-tourist restaurant off the street, you're going to have to order it in Italian. You're going to have to talk to maybe the owner who's also serving you your food in Italian, because there's not going to be anybody in there who speaks English. And so when you're in that situation, you have to muddle through it. And it might be that you've got, back in those days, it was that I had the language dictionary, right? There was no translation app on the phone. There was no, so I had the dictionary open, like translating menus and learning. But it forces you to speak, and you have to speak it to really learn it.
Yeah.
And so do I use it now? No, not really. I don't really use it now, although I talked with somebody who is forming a private equity fund who's an Italian last week, and he has Italian partners. And so, I think there are some opportunities to use it. It's not as universal as a language like Spanish, where you really might encounter a lot of business people who speak it. But I still love it very much.
I have to laugh because I'm sitting here holding my hands because I want to do this.
Yeah, as you see, I'm not very good at holding my hands.
I got them tucked. What? You're interested. You work in mergers and acquisitions. Again, what's fascinating about them to you?
Everything. It really, I love the puzzle of it, first of all, right? It is really the buying and selling of businesses is very much a puzzle. And so, putting together how you deal with all of the strings that are hanging out there for businesses, and you get them neatly packaged so that you can transition that business to somebody else, whether you're on the sell side or on the buy side. And Sal, of course, you and I are in the same world, on this some. And so what that's like. But I enjoy that. I also love, most of the clients that I deal with, we have some serial entrepreneurs where, we're dealing with people who are going to buy and sell multiple businesses. But most of the clients I deal with are going to have probably two transactions. One where they buy the business, and maybe another where they sell it, right? And that means that the people who are going through the purchase of a business or the sale of a business have never gone through it before. And so one of the things that I really love about it is that opportunity to educate people along the way, to kind of hold their hand through this transaction. Buyers are so excited. It's the first time, they're coming into a business. And so to help them understand the process of buying, to help them understand, post-closure integration and what they're going to need to do to get that business up and running after it's in their hands, and to help them through that process. and have them understand, and maybe to create some level of ease in what can be a really stressful process, and to just make sure that that communication is really high. I love that. And so I love that part of it as well as loving the process of it, and, kind of picking apart the agreements and
Now, let me ask you this question, because I know this is something that you and I had talked about privately a while back, but I think it's important to get it out there for the general public. So business transactions come in all shapes and sizes. And sometimes you have to, from a legal perspective, from an accounting perspective, from a business brokerage perspective, from all perspectives, kind of tailor the services a little bit to make them cost effective for the size of the transaction and the risk and the reward and the issues that are involved. So long story short, could you maybe give people out there a feeling for, hey, listen, if you're doing this type of transaction, this is kind of what would make sense. If it's a smaller type of transaction, this is kind of what would make sense, and what we can do, and what you should be doing and looking out for?
Sure. So, I think the first place to start is probably what we do most of. And so our sweet spot is what we would call low middle market. Everybody defines that a little bit differently. We do some Main Street work, but low middle market, most of our deals are between 500,000 and about 12, or maybe upper limit of 20 million. We do smaller deals, we do larger deals, but that's kind of really where we work most of the time. You're right that transactions really do have to be tailored to size. And so one of the things we sometimes talk about is that there is kind of a minimal amount of work that is involved in selling any business. And, one of the things people have to understand is if you're buying a business or selling a business, even if it's a small business, there's still a certain amount of things that have to be done. And so there's real cost in taking care of the legal aspects that have to be done. So you've got to draft, a letter of intent, which is your initial agreement that sets out some non-binding and a few binding terms about the deal, and memorializes your intention to work with the seller as a buyer to own this business. You have to draft the transactional documents, the definitive agreements, as we sometimes call them, to get the deal done. And so that's going to be your stock purchase agreement, or your membership interest purchase agreement, or your asset purchase agreement, depending on how your deal is structured. And that's another thing is we will try to work with your accountants to determine what is best for you. And then we'll try to help guide you through the process of working with the other side to figure out what is best for them as a structure. And then how do you decide based on that where you meet in the middle? Because sometimes if it's really better for you to do this as an asset sale, so that, for example, so that you can get depreciation, it might not be as beneficial for the sellers to do it as an asset sale because they don't want to have capital gains. And so you can offset some of that in purchase price negotiations. And so those are things that, where you really want to think about how the deal should be structured. And so that's a thing that we do a lot, is talking to people who are either buying or selling about how they're going to structure this deal. What's this deal going to look like? And that even includes, assisting people with financing, hooking them up with a potential lender, or talking about what their options might be. A lot of people don't know, they don't understand SBA lending. And so they don't know that, maybe they could get an SBA loan in instances where they might not be able to get conventional financing. They don't know about mezzanine financing and the ability to bridge, their debt, or to maybe have an equity kicker and give away, some portion of the equity in their business, but to get financial support for the deal. And then one of the biggest things is earnouts and transition of ownership, where sometimes people want to sell their business, but they're not quite ready yet to step away from the business entirely. And so they really need to try to find a structure where they can maybe stay engaged in the business. And there are a number of different ways to do that. or even sometimes owner financing, where an owner wants to sell to somebody who's working in the business.
Right.
And that person might not necessarily, based on their salary, have as much capital as they might need. And so sometimes equity gets transitioned to that person over time, as a part of the working process, or gets earned over time. And those are all structural things that we can help. And the beauty of working in that low middle market is that we kind of have that process streamlined down, and we have a sense as lawyers of what your deal needs to be like and how big your documents need to be. We're famous for saying you don't need a 50-page asset purchase agreement, to buy a $225,000 business. And so those things need to be scaled down. We can scale up if we need to. And if somebody needs a 50-page purchase agreement, we can paper everything that needs to be papered, and we can do that for $50 million deals. And we have done it. But we also know how to also just even give people options. So sometimes we would recommend that you would do this. You can save money by not doing it, but you're going to assume additional risk. And so often the discussion is, how do you balance the cost of doing something with the risk that you're assuming? And ultimately, those are decisions for the clients to make. Where they may say, we know you're recommending something, but it's going to cost us too much money. And we just think based on the deal size, we can't afford that. And we talk about that. And sometimes they sign an acknowledgement that, that we're recommending something, but that they're willing to accept the risk. And that's okay too. So helping people through that process of understanding cost and risk. Does that answer your question, Sal?
Yep. Perfect. Thank you.
One of the things that usually I'm on the other side, I'm representing, I have helped the seller. I've helped the seller sell, but I'm usually on the side where the buyer, I'm taking a look and I'm picking at the deal. One of the big surprises that happened to me about 10 years ago, probably even worse now, we ran into an environmental problem. Oh God, yeah. And it was a lot more than we expected. Do your firm handle that, or do you have to
we do. And one of the things that we sometimes do, JoAnn, for sellers is something that we call reverse diligencing. So when you buy a business, there's a process called diligence, and that's the process that, as a buyer, lets you know really what you're buying. And so the seller is going to produce all kinds of documents and information, and some of that is going to be given to your accountants to look at, the financial statements, the tax returns, to evaluate, and maybe even to go through a formal valuation. What's the company worth? To make sure the books are all in order, that everything looks okay, that you haven't taken deductions or depreciation that you shouldn't have taken. And those are things typically that accountants handle on the accounting side of the diligence. And then we do the legal side of the diligence. And that involves, do you have appropriate corporate documents in place? Do you have the permits that you need to run a business? Are you registered in all states where you're doing business to do business? And so do you have appropriate business registrations? But then some of the other things that often involves is environmental considerations, which can be a big concern. And sometimes environmental considerations are a concern for businesses that don't even do anything remotely environmental, because they're on property where there might be environmental considerations, right? And so, we can take a look at those things and talk people through those things, and then that becomes part of a negotiation. If there's remediation required in order to transfer the ownership of the business or change control of the business, then the question becomes, who's doing that and who's paying for it? And those are all things that we can help with. But if people do that in advance as part of that reverse diligence, then you remove those environmental concerns from the equation at the time of sale. And that's one of the things that can really derail a deal, right? We all say time kills the deal. And so one of the things we try to do as a firm is move people efficiently, doing everything that they need to do, so not cutting any corners, but move them efficiently from LOI to closing, right? So how can we get the deal on track, keep it on track, and get it done? And environmental is one of the things that can really derail that timing. If you find out late that you have environmental concerns, and I see you nodding, so maybe you had that happen. But yeah, walking people through that, dealing with everything from stormwater to environmental exposures, to materials used in a production process, to disposal. I mean, those are all environmental issues, land issues, brownfield issues. Those are all issues that are out there that buyers and sellers, need to be cognizant of as a part of the process.
Hey, Jacquelyn, let me ask you a quick question. Because you mentioned about earnouts and maybe the existing owner staying around in some capacity. I know there's another term that comes up a lot in these transactions. It's a holdback. Could you kind of just, in layman's terms, as much as possible, kind of talk about the holdback and how that can be used to maybe facilitate the transaction and maybe shift some risk around so a transaction can get done?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, holdback gets used in a number of different ways. Yeah, even by M&A lawyers to some extent. But really what we're talking about is reserving some portion of the purchase price, or in sometimes reserving some portion of the valuation for a later date. And that can be done with the person's individual compensation. And so it might be that, I'm the seller of the business and I'm going to sell and I'm going to get a revenue bonus if the business continues to earn money. So I may stay on as a consultant, or I may have maybe I don't even stay on as a consultant, but I've made representations about what I think is going to happen with the revenue, or I've made representations and warranties in the agreement that I don't think that major customers are going to leave when I leave, and that revenue is going to continue on a certain trajectory. And so the idea is that then I'll be paid a bonus if that happens. The holdback can be either informal, like I'm going to keep the money and I'll pay it to you later, or it can be more formal and go into escrow, where you're actually taking money and putting it into a bank account, and the money's going to be released from that account based on the happening of certain conditions. So it can go in both directions on revenue. It can be, you're going to get $500,000 extra if things stay the same, and usually that's not exactly the same. It is if revenue increases less than 10% or decreases less than 10%. If it increases more than 10% or up to 10%, and then more than 10% if it increases, instead of getting 500,000, you're going to get 750,000. If it decreases more than 10%, you're only getting $250,000, or you're getting nothing. Right. And so those are all different ways that money can be held back in the transaction, that can help. And sometimes there are also true ups that happen. What are referred to as true ups, as you know, Sal, where you're looking at really what the actual revenue of the company is, or what the value of inventory. This can be a number of different things that get adjusted post-closing to reflect the real value of the deal. And so that's a different kind of form of holdback.
You can also use that. We've used that in a deal as equity. The bank, we had to hold back so much, and that became part of the putting the deal together and getting the financing.
Yeah, and often with SBA loans in particular, you see, requirements for there to be some level of owner financing or owner commitment, of some sort to facilitate that.
Yeah, I've done a lot of SBA loans. So.
Yeah. So that, and those, knowing and understanding those things and how they play out as a part of the deal. I mean, that's what makes M&A so complex, really, is how the financing fits together, how the environmental fits together, how the payments fit together, what's happening with employment, are people going to stay on, are they leaving, for how long, what's that look like, what about the current employees, what about the transition to benefit plans. And so those are all things that have to be taken into consideration. And it's the reason why I say, when you just think about even just what I just said, it's the reason why I say, people need to realize there's a real cost to selling a business, and no matter how small it is.
Okay. What about right now? We are in the time of COVID, so to speak. How has that impacted your business, or hasn't it?
So if I look back into 2020, there was a time where deals, for the most part, shut down as a result of COVID. We've seen really good recovery of deals, and we've seen a lot of deals that were supposed to happen during that period, or maybe supposed to start during that period, coming back now. Going into Q1 of 2021, there's been great deal flow, and I think we're going to keep seeing great deal flow. Some of that, unfortunately, is because some businesses are looking to sell now because they've been taxed so much that it's no longer sustainable for them to continue to run the business. And so it's sell or shutter the doors. But that has created incredible buyer opportunities. So it's really a time now where we see buyers having a lot of options, and we see a lot of businesses coming onto or about to come onto the market as a result of that. I would say one of the biggest impacts we saw in late 2020 and are still seeing is people who got PPP loans. So if you got a PPP loan to pay your payroll and your utilities and your medical benefits, other things that were eligible payments under those loans, that means you can't change control of your business until you've dealt with that PPP loan. And so there are two ways essentially to do that. One is to obtain forgiveness and an SBA payoff. And that's what we're seeing happen more now. And fortunately, I think the banks know more now what to do with making those recommendations to the SBA, and the SBA is turning those things around a little more quickly now. And we're seeing forgiveness and payoff granted. The other thing that you can do is you can apply for forgiveness, and then you can obtain consent from the SBA to change control, and that involves escrowing the value of your PPP loan. And so, people who had a PPP loan, I don't think many of them thought this might impact the value of my business.
Yeah.
To go back to what Sal was talking about, we are seeing more escrowing, more holdback happening to deal with the uncertainty. We're seeing a need to do really increased diligence on the buy side, and the involvement of good accounting firms that can really do business valuation well, being really important. And so we've been, working with our clients to make sure they're with the right people that can really do those valuations, because sorting out right now what's an impact of COVID-19 and what is a market impact is very difficult. And so when you're looking at the balance sheet of a business, or you're looking at the P&L sheets, or even the tax returns now that 2020 is over, it's hard to tell what part of that decline was a result of COVID and what part of that might have been a natural business decline.
Yeah.
And as a result, it's hard to value. It's also hard to tell, even if you can identify something as a COVID impact. We know that this was a decrease as a result of COVID-19. The next question becomes, do we know whether it will come back?
Right.
Right? And so a lot of businesses have eliminated expenses that they couldn't afford during COVID-19. And the question is, will they pick those things back up? Or will they say, we learned we could do without it?
Yeah.
Right? And so if you're the business that provided those services, and now because of COVID, where there was a need to just cut costs at all levels, right? to ensure the continuation of and the stability of the business, people learned to do without things. And so, do you need your commercial shredding contract anymore? Or is there a different way you could do that? And so, things like that, if you're looking at those types of service businesses, you have to say, okay, are people going to make strategic decisions that in order to increase their profitability and speed their recovery, they're going to continue to do without those services either indefinitely or at least for some extended period. So when you're talking about the sale of those service businesses, all those things are very difficult, right? And so we're also seeing increased, scrutiny on reps and warranties and materiality and knowledge qualifiers in agreements. I mean, that's getting a little bit technical, but we're seeing some technical differences in agreements. We're seeing different language in terms of not just reps and warranties, but even general clauses, the force majeure clauses, amended to see inclusion of COVID-19 specifically, but also of pandemics, epidemics, public health crises.
Yeah.
And one of the issues that the buyers really need to look at when they're buying a business right now is, are there contracts in place that where the other side could make an argument that because of their existing force majeure or because of what's happening with the market or with COVID-19, they no longer need to honor that contract. And so you really have to look carefully at the existing contracts that are in place and say, what's the COVID-19 impact on those contracts? And then how's that impact the value of the company, or how's that impact the sale?
So
let me ask you a question, not to backtrack too much on something we've already talked about, but because of everything you've said, I know historically there has been a little bit of a conflict in the sense that, the buyer would like to have an earnout because it shows confidence from the seller in the business. And of course, the seller says, hey, I don't want to take responsibility post closing, so they don't like an earnout. But all that uncertainty, the COVID environment, are you seeing earnouts become more prevalent as part of the deal structure? And do you see sellers being a little more accepting of the fact that that's going to have to be part of the deal if they really want to sell their business, or not?
Yeah, that's a good question. It might be too soon to say,
Okay.
what the full impact is going to be. I mean, I will tell you that we're working on a deal right now that has one, right, that has a revenue bonus in it. And so I do think it's definitely happening. And I think that buyers are seeing it as one way to protect themselves in the deals. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it is increasing, but I can't say that it's becoming the standard. Let's put it that way. I haven't seen it impact franchise deals, but deals where there's manufacturing or service deals, we are seeing it, I think, with increased frequency.
Well, we have been talking almost 45 minutes now. So I think we need to do a wrap. I could talk to you for hours, but one of the, I got to ask this question. I see your hobby is fly fishing.
Yes.
Where do you like to go fly fishing?
Oh, well, I mean, I'm going to give you all my secrets, JoAnn. So I would say, I mean, I'll go anywhere. We fish on the Yawk River a lot for trout. I still like small streams. I have a love for West Virginia and, the heart of West Virginia. I really, when I was learning to fly fish in my teens, I was camping and fishing down there a lot. And so spend a lot of time in the Mon National Forest fishing still. And then I really love to fish out west too. So if I ever have a chance to get to Montana, if they said today that I had to leave this region and I had to go somewhere, If people needed to look for me, Montana is where they should look. Um, and, and so I really do love it out there. I love the spring creeks. I love fishing in the park, in Yellowstone or in Glacier in the parks there. And so, yeah, I mean, I definitely am a stream and river girl, and I love the natives. So, the kind of the deeper into the mountains I am, the happier I am. I'm definitely a mountain girl for sure.
Okay, because I've been up at some of the halls and stuff like that down in Fayette County and West Virginia and stuff. So,
Absolutely, I know them well, like the back of my hand.
okay. Sal, any final questions before we do a wrap?
Just maybe a little bit related to that. I saw that you were also very involved with the Boy Scouts. And I'm assuming, but I don't want to assume that that's also because of your kids, and maybe it was a way for you to do something that was socially good, but at the same time be involved with your kids. So just mention, talk a little bit about your Boy Scouts and what motivated you, all that, and why the Boy Scouts in particular.
Yeah. So I do have two Eagle Scouts in my family. Both my boys are Eagles. And so very proud of that. I loved growing up in the scouting program with them. I had always been, I had always loved the outdoors. I had an outdoorsman father who had an only daughter. He didn't have any sons. He just had me. And so that meant that I learned to fish with him and learned to hunt with him and camped with my parents growing up. And so I grew to really love the outdoors, and I still do. I'm happiest when I'm outside in the wilderness. And so it was a great way to do that with my boys. And it was, as a single mom, it was an especially safe way to do it with my boys when they were young, is I could take them and, in that kind of group setting of the Cub Scout pack and later the troop to do that. I also got really involved in the executive education of the Boy Scouts of America. So the Boy Scouts run what I still think is one of the most economical executive education programs in America. It's a program called Wood Badge. And if you are a Boy Scout leader, you can go through that. I was the course director for a Wood Badge course at the Philmont Scout Ranch, one of the high adventure bases in Cimarron, New Mexico, through the Circle 10 Council in Dallas, Texas. And so that was a national course. We had people from all over the United States that came. As a week-long intensive executive leadership course, half of which is spent in the wilderness. So we're in, Philmont has a great executive leadership training center, the Philmont Training Center, where they have traditional classrooms and it's a very traditional learning environment. And then we took participants into the backcountry up onto Rayado Ridge, and we learned about how to lead conservation projects, but also in the backcountry, we did things like talk about 360 reviews and project management and, problem solving and decision making. But part of the reason I am so passionate about that course, which, I mean, if there will be a course at Philmont this year. So if you're a Boy Scout leader, reach out to me and I'll get you connected with the sign up information for that course. Because it's a way to get a week-long intensive executive leadership training course for under $1,000.
Wow.
That's very, very high quality. All of the people who teach in it are volunteers. In fact, they pay to attend the course themselves for their costs. But it's very, very high quality course. I taught that with, upper level executives from AT&T and people from the private equity world and, people who are trainers, for companies. And so really high quality faculty. One of the things I love about it is that they teach things like listening skills, which I think is something we all need so much and is not taught very often. And so we always talk about public speaking, but how often do we get taught listening as a skill? So really great curriculum, and I loved that involvement with the Boy Scouts and stay involved with them in the Mountain Area Council in West Virginia, to this day. So.
Well, let's do a wrap. Thank you for your time. It was very interesting. And Having been a single mother of raising a son, kudos to you.
Oh, well, thank you so much. It was my pleasure to be a guest and appreciate the opportunity to talk with you about some of the things I love.
Sal, anything you want to say as a wrap up?
No, same thing. Thank you for coming on the show, and for everyone listening, by the way. And I should have said this maybe at the beginning, but if you had to pay for this one-on-one advice with Jacquelyn, trust me, it would be a pretty penny. So she has been very generous with her time, with her knowledge, with her advice, and I hope this is useful to everybody that has stuck with us to all the way here to the end of the video.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, Jacquelyn. And your information will be posted on the YouTube. So what is the best way to get a hold of you, though? Just
Honestly, the best way is my cell phone, which is out there in the public domain. So I don't mind if people use it because it's a great way for business owners to connect with me. It is 304-777-0790, good for voice and text. And always happy to talk with an owner who's considering sale or somebody who's looking to purchase business. We have great connections for a lot of businesses that are for sale and can help people prepare for sale, or if they need counsel or even just general business work. We do a lot of contracts work and corporate reorganization. So happy to help with any of those things, and always happy to talk with somebody who might need it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we want to wish everybody a good week, a prosperous week. Please take care of yourself. Wear your masks. Do all the things that we need to do to get us all back to face. But this is fun. So thank you. This is JoAnn Forrester wishing everyone well, and Sal Acosta and our guest. Thank you.
Thank you very much.